My name's John Morris. I'm at present 84 years old. My story starts from a little town called Little Lever. At that time I was 18. I was conscripted into the British Army and I served my time at Blackdown, at Hilsey rather, where I did my basic training.
So, how long was it, were you in the military before you went to Christmas Island?
2 years.
2 years, and what did they tell you?
Nothing.
What kind of, all right, so you showed up at Christmas Island.
Yes.
And that's when you first heard that it was a test of nuclear weapons?
No, I didn't even know that until I'd been there approximately 6 months and we were told that a bomb had been detonated about 400 or 500 miles away nearer Australia than Christmas Island. After that, we realised there was something that we weren't being told. That we were told that we were building an airport on the island so that aircrafts could land and take off and eventually drop a nuclear bomb. What we didn't know is they'd already been doing this whilst they were building the airport, and the bombs had been dropped from balloons. Now, the very first story had been told was one of the balloons went up and the meteorological people had got the wind wrong and the balloon drifted approximately 25 miles off course.
And this was before you showed up?
This is when we were there, and the bomb went off, but we didn't realise the bomb had gone off until about 3 or 4 weeks later, when suddenly it rained. And we thought, it's Christmas Island. It never rains on Christmas Island. The only time it rains on Christmas Island is when the rainy season came. We never thought anything about it. We just thought, well, it's one of them things. And then I was talking to some engineers who'd built a small village on an atoll in the middle of the Pacific. That atoll was a relatively small place, and they were going to drop a bomb from a balloon. They dropped the bomb. They went back an hour later to take samples, and they couldn't find the island. The island had completely disappeared.
And somebody told you this, right?
No, they didn't need to tell us, because half the island finished up on Christmas Island in debris, and again water, and we found out later that this was seawater that had been sucked up from the ocean, and eventually something that goes up has got to come down. But again, we did not realise its significance.
So when it
I'm
rained,
18.
So when it rained, it was a lot of particles in the water?
Well, it was a mixture of rain and possibly sand, but you just didn't. Well, you thought, God, it's raining, which was so unusual. But then the thing was that nobody ever explained.
So did the rain come before you saw your first test or after the first? After. So the only time it really rained was in the rainy season. And when it rained, it rained. So which was the bomb that you first saw?
It was the only bomb I actually saw physically. And that was 20 miles away from the island. It was bomb 4. It was the biggest bomb that had ever been produced. And we were ordered, and that's the key word, we were ordered to go to the beach and sit there in a pair of shorts, a t-shirt and a pair of sunglasses. We could see the bomber, which was a Vulcan bomber, circling, and it did a figure of 8, and when it hit the apex, we had to turn round and sit down, and we had the countdown, and when we got to 10, the bomb was dropped. It gave the Vulcan bomber time to disappear and get out of harm's way. And we're sat there, and the bomb went off. Now, you've heard many, many stories, and if I said to anybody in this room, would you sit 20 miles from the centre of the sun with a pair of shorts and a shirt on? Because that is what I did. Apparently, the nuclear explosion is as hot as the centre of the sun, albeit it only lasts a few seconds.
So what I'm interested in is, what did you think? Do you remember what you thought when you saw it?
I thought I'd seen the end of the world.
So you were scared?
I wasn't only scared, along with many, many other people, we were terrified. We hadn't been given any clue, any warning, any notification of what to expect. Now, surely to goodness, the Ministry of Defence must have known what they were exposing us to. Without a shadow of a doubt, as the years have gone on, I now realise at that time, I was 18, going on 19, I was a human guinea pig for the Ministry of Defence.
Yes, they did know what they were doing. You were guinea pigs. But my interest is, and for this is, what your attitude was, what you thought. You said that you felt like that, it was the end of the world, which is a legitimate thing to think about. They didn't tell you anything, but did you know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
At 19, no, not really. You heard of these words. You did not understand the veracity of a nuclear explosion. And let me tell your listeners, your watchers, if ever you hear about a bomb possibly being dropped near you, for God's sake, get as near to that bomb as you possibly can, because the consequences are worse if you're 50, 60, 70 miles away. You will suffer for the rest of your life with catastrophic problems. Not only you, but your family will.
Let's hope we don't ever go there.
So if I had to, I would sit right under the bomb so it obliterated me, because I wouldn't want to be exposed to what I have since found out, since seen with my own eyes, of people disabled, disfigured, and families destroyed. There were men, at that time I was a 19-year-old boy. There were men who were older than me, and it destroyed them. I did not understand the word PTSD at that time. I now do, because there were people that were experienced flashbacks for the rest of their lives.
Yes, they were. So how long were you in the military? How long did you serve after the test?
I was conscripted, and we did 2 years. So you were supposed to spend 12 months on Christmas Island. I spent 16 months, which was unusual. And I was discharged from Christmas Island And I went back to the UK, and 6 weeks later I was discharged out of the army because I'd completed my service.
So did you ever think about the bomb when you were...
Never. I did think about it. I thought about what would happen if it dropped anywhere near me. How would that affect me and my family? And I realised it wouldn't affect them at all because they wouldn't know, they'd be dead.
It's true. So what did you do? What was your job when you, in regular life?
My job at that time, I was working in a paper mill as a paper maker. I then, because of conscription, you had to go back to the firm that you'd worked for originally. They had to keep your job open. I went back to that, and I worked quite successfully, got married, and then we had a child, and unfortunately that child died after 4 months.
What was wrong with you?
I've only recently found out, and like I said, I am now 84. I tried to get hold of death certificates and a coroner's report. The coroner's report I only received 4 years ago. I had a solicitor that applied for it and they would not release it. I've since found out my son died of a lung problem. Now, whether that was connected to Christmas Island, I have no idea.
Hold on.
So,
I didn't see it. Just, did you put it on silent?
yeah, so down.
So you had no idea, your son died after 4 months, you must have been devastated. Did you have any problems physically?
Yes. It's very difficult to go back in time, but when you wake up in the morning and you find your son dead in his cot and your wife absolutely distraught, you question, why didn't we do something about it? And I still cannot believe that we were, I often think, were we negligent? We looked every night to see that, as you always do, and because of the cot death, the ambulance came, took him away, and we went to hospital, me and my wife. We were in hospital, and about an hour later, both myself and my wife were arrested and accused of killing our child. Now, I don't know if anybody who is listening to this has ever been in that situation. It was, at that time, I'm 24. I'm a little bit wiser at 24 than I was at 19. But I'd never, ever in my wildest dreams been in trouble with the police. And you are then subjected to an horrendous questioning. And I was there from approximately 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's terrible. So you were emotionally devastated and this didn't help it?
No.
Did you have any trouble having, that was your first child, right?
Yes.
Did you have any trouble with the second child or the third child?
No, other than you can imagine that the problem of trying to talk to your wife about having other children. The doctor, God rest his soul, was really very, very good. Inasmuch, he said to us, he said, what you need to do is have a child as soon as you possibly can. It's almost like getting on a bike, you fall off, they say get back on it and you'll start to ride. And that literally was the situation. But the problem with that was for years, not months, years, we used to go upstairs, both me and my wife, and we would poke our children to make sure they were still breathing. And every morning for years, you would wake up and hope they were still breathing. It's very, very difficult to explain to anybody that particular element. Now, because of that, as I said earlier, was a paper maker. I could no longer do that job. My wife could not be alone in the house at night.
That's horrible. Did your next kids have any physical problems at all?
No, not that I am aware of, other than my eldest daughter, who is with me today, did have trouble conceiving children, and I'm aware of at least one miscarriage.
And did you have any physical problems later on in life?
I've had, like most people, I have pernicious anemia since the age of 26. I have injections every 3 months for the rest of my life, and that's been going on for 60 years. I've also had cancer, and I've lost my hair, all the usual things.
So at 26 you had basically your first illness, but you didn't correlate it to being service related, right?
Correct, I had no idea.
So, and we're not looking back yet, we will get to that point. So when did you start putting together that there may be a problem from being exposed to ionizing radiation during the test?
It never really realised in my mind, other than there was a friend of mine who lived in a place called Rochdale, who was on Christmas Island with me, and he died of cancer when he was 30 odd. And I thought, gee, that can't be right. I mean, he was a really fit man. And I started putting 1, 2 and 3 together, you know, as you do. And I thought, this cannot be coincidental. So I started to ring round. And out of the initial troop I was with, which were about 30 of us, I found out that 10 of those 30 had died relatively young, all of cancer, of some form or other.
How old were you when you found that out?
I found that out when I was about 34, 35. And then I started to push to find out further information. I even spoke in Los Angeles, in the Rotaries in Los Angeles, about Christmas Island. And luckily for me, a lot of the people there had relatives that have worked for the nuclear industry in America. And they enlightened me in certain areas of radiation and its problems. And slowly but surely, as I started to talk to people, I found out that I personally had been used as a guinea pig by the MOD, along with, originally there were 3,000 went on Christmas Island. At this moment in time, my latest figure is, I believe there are 42 of us still alive. Now the death rate, and I've had this actuarially looked at, there should be approximately 100 still alive at that age group.
So what age were you when you were speaking in LA? Were you in your 30s or were you older?
I was 42ish, 45.
So you were ahead of the game from most of these people, because a lot of these guys didn't ever realize till they were in their 60s, 70s, and then found like the BNTVA or NAV or something like that. But you were already ahead of the game.
It's because I was so inquisitive. I always felt guilty. I still feel guilty today that I was not there for my son when I was in my age 24. And I questioned, and I still question even now, and I'm 84, that should I have done or could I have done more? I also question how my wife coped with that trauma, because it was one of those things, and today has made me realise a lot of the men, I was one of them, never ever spoke to their wives about the exposures that we were involved in.
Why did you do that?
There was somebody said today they felt like their husbands had a chest of drawers and they put that memory in the drawer and shut the drawer. And I was one of those. And I thought that was a very, very unique breakdown of the thought patterns of the people at that time. And as I talked to the veterans over the years, and I have talked to quite a number, I realised that the Ministry of Defence failed dramatically in their duty of care.
They committed a crime.
If they had organised themselves, they could have buried all this trouble that will come their way years ago. But all they needed to do was recognise what we did for this country.
So you want to be recognised? Do you want to be recognized?
That's all I want. People often say that all you're doing it for is compensation. Well, I will tell anybody listening or seeing this film, if I get compensation, I will immediately give it to Andy Burnham's fund for the homeless.
That's very nice.
That will be the first thing. But I also realise I'm not naive. There are people who needed that money there and then. I will go back to Stephen's death. Now, you can imagine the trauma of me going home the following day and then me and my wife going shopping. You weren't known as Mr. and Mrs. Morris at that time. You were known, oh, that's that couple whose youngster died. I wonder if they killed it.
No, I know. You expressed it. It's an unbelievable tragedy. But have you had any physical problems? Have any of your children or grandchildren have had any physical problems? Has it been something that has haunted you, that has affected your relationship with your family?
No, it's not haunted me, and it's not affected really, because we have an open relationship. But I worry for them. I will worry for them for as long as I live.
So you know that this video that we're putting together is going to be shown in Vienna for a UN conference.
Right.
So what would you tell people that have never seen the bomb? What would you tell them to think about? What is your opinion?
My opinion is, at the time, I thought, after the event, that I was doing something for this country. I thought I was helping this country to become a country that could stand on its own feet. I now understand a nuclear bomb is not the way. They should be disbanded. It can never happen because too many powerful people have too much money invested in it, and you are trying to change something that's been invented. You'll never change that that's been invented. So if I was saying to someone, as I said earlier, if somebody drops a bomb, get right underneath it, because you'll never know anything about it. Do not live within close proximity. You've seen this in Hiroshima, you've seen it in Chernobyl, where people's lives and their towns, their cities, their land, their livestock, their trees, their food has been contaminated. And this is what I would say is, do not drop a bomb anywhere, because one will lead to the other and this world will disappear. We've already made a bit of a mess of it. By God, if ever you go down that path, you will make a bigger mess, and a mess that you cannot send a truck to clean up. You cannot send a group of men to clean it up. First of all, there will not be the people there, and secondly, there'd be too much, and this world has gone. And that means civilization has disappeared. Think very closely of how you approach this subject. You need to convince people that the only way that you can resolve this is through education. Our young people need to be totally aware of what has been invented. The young people, and I've met some young people today, they're investigating this. Superb young people. Their minds are active, their minds are sharp. They are people of great integrity, and they will pursue the right path, I hope. All I ask is support them. Support their goal to improve this world and not destroy it, because we're doing a pretty damn good job of doing it. And for God's sake, waken up, all of you, to this problem, because you might be too late. The atomic bomb, the megaton bomb, is an horrendous weapon. I can say that from experience. I've been there. I've seen 4 of them. I felt it. I still feel it. I still think about the things that happened during that stay on Christmas Island for 2 years, where you've seen the natives living destroyed, where they couldn't sell the coconuts because they were contaminated, where the fish, and even today the fish that they're fishing, are destroyed, or they are unusually disfigured.
Yes, it's the same thing in the Marshall Islands where I've been.
And it's frightening. And I blame the establishment. There is too much money involved in the establishment. There is too much power amongst the establishment, and they will not listen.
That's excellent.
I desperately want this message to get out into as broad a field as is possible. As I said earlier, I've spoken in Los Angeles, I've spoken in New York, I've spoken in Australia, I've spoken in New Zealand with this message.
Well, I think that we've gotten what we need.
Thank you.
I promise you. And all I want you to say, I mean, your statement that you said prior to all this about it's a bad thing, it's going to happen to you, and it should never be used, is exactly the statement that should be made. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I want you to say your name, that you're a British atomic veteran, and you're not going to stop trying to stop it, and then we're going to interview your family.
As I said earlier when I introduced, I'm John Morris. I am currently 84. At the start of this adventure, I was 18. And I'm very, very grateful to the people that are interested in the veterans, there are approximately 22,000 have started out on this journey. We are down to about 1,500, and that is a disgrace on our MOD and the support they have given the veterans over the years. I have not received one ha'porth of support. The only support I got was from the neighbourhood where I lived. I could not afford to bury my son. The neighbourhood had a collection, and my mother and my wife's parents paid for the funeral because me and my wife did not have that money. My name is John Morris. I am 84.
And who is next to you, John Morris?
This is my daughter, Elizabeth Bacon, and she has been a stalwart in all this adventure.
Are you the eldest daughter?
No, so I am, my mum and dad had 4 children. Tragically, my older brother Stephen died at 4 months old. I've got an older brother Ian and a younger sister Kay. So sitting next to me is Laura, my niece.
Yeah, my name's Laura. I'm John's granddaughter and Elizabeth's niece.
I think we've been on quite an interesting journey as a family, and I feel that alongside the ICAN campaigns and the other campaigning that's gone on, we feel like we've really in the last few years gained some real momentum. So the story of my dad being at Christmas Island has been within our family since I can remember. So we've talked about it as a story. My dad being in somewhere called Christmas Island and all the exciting things that entailed. Alongside that, along with lots of other family memories, we learnt about Stephen, who would have been our older brother. We looked at pictures of him. It was shared that he died as a 4-month-old baby, and he was spoken about. But at no point really was there any correlation between the two things. As you then grow up and you go to school and you become educated and you learn more and more about history and current affairs, and then as you develop into an older teen, go to uni, you become more politically aware of lots of things, you then start to understand that Dad's story was much bigger than a story, and he was actually a historical event, a significant historical event. So that when you showed us things like the photograph of the mushroom cloud, that we'd got a primary source, we'd got, in my dad, somebody who had lived and breathed the experience. And then you start to think about it, and as a family, we started to talk about different things. We started to talk about what could have happened, what the circumstances were around it, because we are a family who talks and shares. And then you start, as the world moves on, we learn more and more about nuclear weapons. We learn more and more about the effects of radiation, albeit everything about nuclear radiation being so harmful has been around since the 1800s, so that wasn't new. But you actually then start realising that nuclear weapons are the most dangerous thing that humans have ever invented.
Excellent. So is that based on, so you knew about Stephen from the very beginning, right?
Yeah, we knew that we'd had a brother. Now what's interesting is that when my mum was alive, again, it was a story, it was part of our history. Now it was only 3 years ago where my dad said, with his grandchildren being older and now being young adults, that he would really like to document this a little bit more. And for the first time, we sat down, didn't we, and had an in-depth conversation, and I wrote it down. And it took us a couple of days, didn't it, and a few drafts. And it was the first time that we actually realised what this involved. And this was much more than an interesting story about our cool dad. This was about a tragedy. This was about our parents who had suffered a trauma. And this was about a piece of my dad's history that then became a piece of our family's history that was so actually significant and so serious. And as a result of that, we began to investigate further, we began to ask more and more questions, and between us, we all started to get incredibly interested and wanted to dig further and further and further. We were already proud of my dad at the campaigning he'd done throughout his lifetime, the talks he'd given and so on. But then when you start to connect with the wider community, you actually realise that were our outrage for people denying my dad's story and people denying that there was causation between his exposure to the nuclear bomb tests and his health and potentially the death of Stephen, you then start to get not only emotional but also angry about this.
So I've got a question for you. You know that this is a very small community, right? You know that very, very few people know about this, right?
Yes.
Okay, this is why we're all working towards it. But the message needs to be, how do you communicate with other people? Because none of your friends know about it.
Mm-hmm.
You go walk into any classroom you are and say, my granddad was a atomic veteran. What would they say?
I think that's the significant issue with all of this, is the fact that people don't know about it, and the thing that we need to change is that education piece. So every school needs to talk about this, every history lesson needs this in there, every national curriculum should speak about it, it should be part of the Cold War, it should be known in the same way that World War II is talked about, World War I is talked about. These people are heroes and they are forgotten, and that is absolutely something that should not be being wiped from our history books. It should be being celebrated. And the fact that the MOD want to hide this and brush it under the carpet is doing the biggest disservice and is so disrespectful for those men that put everything on the line for this country and ensured its safety up until the present day and beyond.
I think as well, we need to, for the next generation who is coming through, represented here by Laura, it's about a duty of candour, a duty to tell the truth, a duty not to cover things up. How dare they deny my dad's story and all the other people that we've met within this nuclear veterans community? How dare they think that people now will just accept the story, that they won't look deeper, that they won't question, that they won't want to know the truth behind it, that they can just brush it under the carpet.
And that's the frustrating part, isn't it?
It's the frustrating part is that there are people who think that it's okay to blatantly cover it up, to blatantly deny the service that these people gave, and to be so disrespectful to people's experiences and people's history in such a maverick way, and that it doesn't matter. And that we are having to get political backing, we're having to put our own time and effort into something that is just so obviously wrong. It is just outrageous. Excellent. That we are still campaigning in this way. We tell the world that it's time to get educated in this, find out the truth, find out what happened. History allows us to deal with the present and informs the future. It prevents the same mistakes being made again. And we need people to know about this. We need young people to want to care, want to listen and want to find out more. And everybody needs to educate themselves on this. We can't let this keep being dismissed and this happen again.
I think really simply put, I'd say this is a great injustice and now is the time to do the right thing.
Had this never happened to John, would you be involved?
Good question. Probably not. However, we now have generations of interested people who want to know more about everything. Everything's at our fingertips now. So I would like to think that I would read this story and then read more and find out more. So it's a tricky one. There are lots of causes out there, there are lots of injustices out there, but this is our fight, this is what we want. And the message is as well that even when my dad is no longer here, we still will be here, and we will still be campaigning, and we will still be banging the drum on this one and educating people about what happened.
Just how would you tell somebody, if they can't feel it, that this is real?
I think I would say, again, back to sort of other examples of where people have put their life on the line. We weren't part of World War One, we weren't part of World War Two, but we all understand it. We know what those people did. We've talked about the experience, we've documented the experience. We understand what the impact might have been, and we get taught about the Cold War. We all understand what the impact might have been if one of those bombs had been let off, if people didn't have those peace talks and we weren't in the state that we're in today. So because it's not part of your family history, and because it's not someone that you directly know, everybody can still understand the moral issues that are at bay here, and the fact that people aren't being recognised and the truth is not being told. And actually everybody fully understands how important the truth is, and that's the basis of this whole argument, and this whole campaign is about righting a wrong, fixing a significant injustice and getting the truth out there. And anyone can understand that, whether you're personally linked to this situation or not.
I mean, it's never too late. Reparation has to be done. We didn't know about post-traumatic stress, we do now. You're forgiven for not knowing about it then. Do something about it now. This isn't right. Stop insulting us. This isn't a joke. This isn't something to just dismiss. This happened. Mistakes were made. People were misled. They did not look after you. They did not show you a duty of care. They're not showing you any duty of care now. Your trauma continues. We're supporting you with that. And we will continue to do that. But it's not good enough. It's just not good enough. And we thank you for what you and all the veterans did and your service. But of course we would. But our government needs to thank them as well and acknowledge what they did. It's absolutely disgraceful that they can deny you your story. How dare they? How dare they think that that's okay? Because it isn't.
What I think is really neat is you love your father, you love your grandfather, and that's why you're here. Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful thing.
It's a great tribute to the support. I am not an educated man in the real sense of the word. I have no university degree. I am just a worker, always been a worker, and I've always tried to do the best, both for my family and this country, and the world in general. Because what I leave behind is the mess to clean up. And believe you me, the megaton bomb is a mess. And that is something, Geneva, you need to concentrate upon, because unless you do something about it, it will never ever go away. You cannot uninvent what's gone on, but you can prevent, and you can recognise and accept the injustices that have gone on, both to the land that has been involved in this, because it's not just about people. The land that our families inherit is so valuable. The water we drink is so valuable. Please do not destroy it any more than you have done, because if you carry on doing it, we're in a mess.